Hey, it's Justin. I realize for many of you, this is the first time you've ever seen a proper demonstration of how to wear a flannel shirt. You'll notice, yes, it's tucked in, although there are circumstances that will allow a flannel shirt to be untucked, and that is if it is untucked naturally over the course of a day of hard work, or if you're cleaning up for dinner and you want to stay out of trouble and you just don't quite have the time to get that shirt tucked back in before you sit at the table. That would be appropriate. You also notice the absence of flip-flops, wearing proper boots. And among other things, absent, in addition to flip-flops, would be a $20 coffee and man bun. Now don't get all mad at me, I don't make the rules. They're in the good book. That's right. Second Misunderstandings, chapter 1, verse 1. Thou shalt not wear a flannel shirt unless thou hast chopped wood. Okay, I told a buddy that flannel shirt joke, and he kind of got serious with me. And he said, that's right. That's right. A flannel shirt is not an article of clothing. It is a badge that you earn that says that you have gone into the woods, you have chopped down a tree, and you have survived. And, well, I'd have to agree with him. And, yes, I've earned my flannel shirt. But what I want to talk to you about here is, if you would, let your mind go on a little bit of a journey with me. Let it wander. Back 2,000 years ago, to the Roman Empire. The city is Jerusalem. The time is Passover. Over 1 million godly people have crowded into the city to celebrate Passover. They offer clean animals up for sacrifice to cover their sin over the past year. They come this same week, every year. It's what their scriptures say they must do. And the city is packed. There are restaurants, guest houses, all full. And what I want to talk to you about happened on a quiet back street. No one's written about this individual, but we know he had to be there. An old Roman timber cutter, working hard, trying to make money. Go with me now. Hurry up, they said. Make another. Gotta have it today. I don't know how many of these death trees Rome has, but they need another. You know, nothing's been the same since Jesus entered this country a few years ago. And now he's been sentenced to death on a Roman cross. How quickly things have turned. The strange thing is, earlier this week, he rode into town like a king. He was on a donkey. The crowd was huge. They were taking their coats off and paving the street with them. The donkey's hooves didn't even touch the stone. They were pulling palm branches off the trees and waving them, praising him, shouting, Hosanna! They called him their king, Messiah. They thought he'd come to rule the land. They thought he'd lead some kind of rebellion. And this Jesus, he spoke unlike anyone ever before. He said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. That doesn't sound like a king to me. He said, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. That doesn't sound like a king either. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Whatever, wherever heaven is. He said, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Now I'll ask you, how does anyone see a God who cannot be seen? And he said that if the temple were destroyed, he'd rebuild it in 3 days. Doesn't he know it took 150,000 workers 7 years to build that temple? And he says he could rebuild it in 3 days by himself. I don't know what that's all about. Earlier this week, Jesus caused a huge disruption from in the temple, and powerful people are really unhappy with him. They took him before Pilate, the chief judge over all Judea, who pronounced him to be innocent 5 times, and yet he is still going to be executed. How quickly things have turned. You know, crucifixion has got to be the worst, most torturous, painful, humiliating way to die. I'd rather rot in one of their smelly dungeons than face this. It was invented by the Persians, and when Rome conquered Persia, they adopted the practice, became experts at it. It's what Rome does to anyone who causes a stir, makes a commotion. It's how they handle sedition. It's how they get people to cower before the authority of Rome. Tens of thousands, including women and children, have been crucified. You know, and then another thing this Jesus said. He claimed to be the Son of God, which, according to their rules, their scriptures, is blasphemy. Anyone who claims to be God or the Son of God has committed blasphemy, punishable by death. So they took him to Pilate, and Pilate sent him to a scourging with a cat of 9 tails, which is a terrible whip. Actually, multiple whips woven to a single handle with shards of bone and metal tied to each tail. And with each hit, the shards cut into the body. The technique isn't so much about the strike as it is the follow through. It rips flesh and muscle from the skeleton. You know, the body doesn't even look human after a scourging. He was sentenced to 40 lashes, which is often fatal. Many have died receiving far fewer. Now, I don't know how many they gave him, but I do know it was at least one short of killing him. You see, he wouldn't be visible enough tied to the whipping post there in the square. No, he's drawn crowds numbering in the thousands. So they will elevate him on a cross. So as many as possible see him die. That ought to do it. The crucifixion following the scourging is made all the more painful. I know you might have seen an artist's rendering of crucifixion, and the artist probably drew the person still wearing some undergarments to extend modesty. But they want this to be humiliating. Drew it up there. So make no mistake. Before they lay him on the cross, they will strip him naked. Then stretch him out on it. And we will drive a nail through each hand or wrist, depending on how they decide to do it. And then the cruelest nail of them all, through his feet. Cruel, not because it's painful, which it is painful, but because it extends the suffering. You see, the human body, suspended by the arms, it's not possible to exhale. He would suffocate far too quickly. But that nail through the feet, as painful as it is, will allow him to push up, dragging his ripped up back against the rugged cross to exchange air, only to slump again. Some people have lived as many as 3 days in this manner. Finally, when they think it's gone on long enough, the soldiers will take clubs or sledgehammers and break his legs, making him unable to raise for another breath. Or sometimes they'll take a sword or a spear, run him through as he hangs there. Either way, he'll be dead. The cross is slow. It is painful. And it is undeniable. No one survives a crucifixion. The Romans are professionals. If the Roman coroner who pronounces him dead is wrong, he'll be crucified for his mistake. So he'll be dead. And that will be the end of him. It will scatter his followers and drive them silent. Is this Jesus who he says he is? I don't know. I don't know. But this is what I do know. Of the thousands who have already been crucified, can you name any? Me neither. You see, the cross has a way of erasing people from history. So, if he's not who he says he is, you'll never hear of him again. But if he's anything like who he says he is, if he's only half of who everybody else says he is, then the cross and even death won't be able to erase him. No. If he really is the Messiah the Redeemer, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords. No matter what happens next, people will talk about him forever. Drama's over. That was perspective from a Roman. Let me give you another side of the story. This Jesus fulfilled hundreds of Old Testament prophecies that no human would have any control over, from the bloodlines of his ancestors to the manner of which he was born to the circumstances of his death. And it really was Passover. The city really was packed. And he really did say that he could rebuild the temple in 3 days. They even used it against him in trial. We're going to pick that up here in John chapter 18, verse 29, where the church leaders have taken Jesus before Pilate, the judge. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." See, it's already sneaky right from the beginning. Hey, we wouldn't have brought him here if he wasn't guilty. Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." Well, he's telling the church leaders, hey, he broke your law, not mine. You handle it. And here's their reply. "But we have no right to execute anyone," the Jews objected. You see, it's again, he's guilty, worthy of death. Here you go, Pilate. Hang him up. This happened so that the words Jesus had spoken, indicating the kind of death he was going to die, would be fulfilled. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." And Pilate's like, "Yahtzee! Gotcha! You didn't say you were king, but you just said you have a kingdom, so..." And here we are. "You are a king then," Pilate said. Jesus answered, "You are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. With this, he went out again to the Jews and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of Passover." So there's a couple things going on here that are pertinent. One, it's Passover. Over 1 million godly people have packed into the city for Passover. It's also a Roman festival. So a whole bunch of Romans have come in as well. The town is packed. It is busy. And as you can imagine, leaders throughout the region want to do their thing. They want to have their Passover, or they want to enjoy their festival. They want no nonsense, no riots, no trials. They just want everybody to get along and behave themselves. So Pilate's kind of bothered by this, thinks, I can smooth this over. As part of their Passover deal, I usually cut somebody loose from jail. I'll get this guy off the hook. We're done. So he said, I release one prisoner at the time of Passover. "Do you want me to release the king of the Jews?" And they shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now, Barabbas had taken part in a rebellion. So Pilate really didn't want him cutting loose. And he's just a little ticked off at this point. but thinks, I got it. I'll send him away to be scourged. He'll come back, ripped up, limping. People will see him all bloody and stuff, and they'll feel sorry for him. And they'll go home. So here we are, chapter 19, verse 1. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. 8 simple words. But in those 8 words was the scourging with the cat o' nine tails. A terrible punishment. Often fatal, but in this case they would have given him less than what would have been. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe signifying royalty and went up to him again and again, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him in the face. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews, Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. And when Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, Here is the man! And I'm sure he was probably whispering over his shoulder a little bit too, saying, That's a good limp you got going on over there, buddy. Just fall a couple times on your way here. I think they're buying it. He was desperately trying to end this. As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, Crucify! Crucify! But Pilate answered, You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him. The Jews insisted, We have a law, and according to that law, he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. He went back inside the palace. Where do you come from? He asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said. Don't you realize I have power to either free you or crucify you? And Jesus answered, You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, who has handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. And from then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be king opposes Caesar. So they're even threatening Pilate via political ties. Hey, even Caesar would be on our side on this one. They're really pressuring him. And when Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out. And before he did that, I'm sure he had a chat with him. He probably said, Dude, can you let this go? It's all they've got. Just ixnay on the Isiame. Nothing else sticks. So Pilate came out and sat on the judgment seat. Here is your king, Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, Take him away, crucify him. Shall I crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar, the chief priests answered. And finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. And so the thing I hope you catch, ladies and gentlemen, is that this wasn't some unfortunate accident. It was intentional. 100% intentional. Everything humans intended for bad, heaven intended for good. Think about it. The city was crowded. No shortage of witnesses. Crucifixion is not survivable. 100% mortality. No one could say he faked his death. And far too many people saw him alive after. Nobody could say it was a conspiracy. And they really did see him alive after. He walked around for 40 days. Appeared at one time among a group of 500 people. And of course, he took extra time with his disciples. And can you imagine what that must have been like when who they thought was dead was standing in the room with them? I'm sure he had to wake a few of them up because they passed out. I'm sure. He probably was trying to catch them like, whoa, sit, oh, lay, okay. Wake him back up and say, it's really me. It's really me. I'm okay. I'm here. Show him his scars. In terms of Passover, Jesus was the perfect lamb, the final sacrifice. This wasn't just for past sin or future sin. This was for all sin, for all time. Jesus would declare an eternal victory over the devil and all his games. Only the evil Satan doesn't want you to believe that. When you come to a point that you want to turn, you want to be better, you want to make a right decision, Satan's game is to remind you of your past mistakes and say, oh, so you think you can be better, do you? You want to change, really? Remember when you said this? Or remember when you did that? And my, if anyone knew about the other thing, you know the other thing, nobody would accept you. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the game of a losing, sorry opponent who has nothing left to play. And when you read your Bible, you'll see that the battle is over. It's finished. Jesus has already secured the victory. Satan loses. All you have to do is join the winning side. And you do that by accepting him. Think about this. What he did was so mind-blowing, so profound. Everyone since then on this planet has had to come to the point of Jesus and have that sort of internal conversation or that understanding or that reconciliation that he's real, he did that, or turn their back on him. Everyone at some point in time has had to come to that decision. And maybe it's that time for you. Maybe this has stirred your soul. Maybe this has caused some questions. Maybe you're wondering what's going on inside of that head of yours right now. I would encourage you to reach out to a friend, a coworker, a family member, somebody at the local church. Chances are there's already someone in your mind. Talk to them. Talk to them. Get your questions answered. and have a better understanding of who Jesus is and what he really did for you. And make this next Easter the best one ever. God bless.